Okay, folks, welcome. You know, honestly, this is such an intimate crew here today. I honestly feel like I could just stand in front of you without a microphone. But we're going to make this so that as folks continue to come in, of course, we're in Los Angeles, which means you have already braved the traffic, the parking, and the walk over, and did not get confused by the USC event also happening just down the walkway. Maybe you even came into fanfare from a brass band playing at the same time. So that was a nice welcome. Great to have everybody. Thank you very, very much for being with us today. As most of you know, this is part of a two-part event. We are going to be beginning with this sort of intimate table talk with the esteemed Dr. Debra Kawahara. With us today is the incoming APA president, and Connell Persico moderating, really just a dialogue. Kind of a relaxed way to be able to share a little bit about Debra's background, current and future vision for APA and psychology. We're really excited to be able to have all of you. As I said, we'll have folks continuing to come in as the afternoon unfolds. And if you don't know, I am with the Alliant Educational Foundation. I know I've met several of you before, and so it's great to have you with us. Essentially, the foundation is the philanthropic and charitable partner with Alliant International University. So we talk about our work in terms of broadly education and mental health, and more specifically, folks tend to know us because of the support we give for students. So we do a number of scholarships, which is sort of the biggest way that students are involved in benefiting from that support, including fellows, a new multi-year investment in the PsyD and PhD in the clinical psych program. Faculty and staff know us because of innovation and seed grants most often, and community knows us largely because of the Regional Children's Mental Health Consortium. Essentially as an expansion of the practicum program, really building across the state of California, initially in San Diego, just launching in the San Francisco Bay Area, and helping to support a new in-house clinic with the Sacramento program. So programmatically, that gives you some vision of what the Alliant Educational Foundation is about. What I will add is that it is also led by an all-volunteer board of directors. They are 100% volunteer and help in terms of governance and strategic planning and policy setting for the foundation. So I know at least two of our board members are here. I just ask you to stand for a quick moment. If Connell Persico would stand for a moment, and Don Wing. Two of our wonderful dozen board members that are helping to provide leadership for the foundation. Now, I will just add an extra point, and that is that Connell will also be moderating the session today, again, in sort of an informal dialogue with Debra as part of the discussion. Connell wears many hats at the foundation, including the vice chair of our board, leading our development committee on our program advisory committee, and was the senior vice president and professor with the university, and has sort of retired. I honestly think you haven't retired because you work for the foundation for free now, so we appreciate that. Also, Reggie Garcia in the back corner. Reggie, if you'd raise your hand. So Reggie Garcia is the relatively new development director and alumni relations. So if any of you have worked in the past with Sarah Garrow or with Michael Newman, you may remember that critical role of alumni relations. Well, Reggie is now our guy. We are very, very lucky to have Reggie. Reggie has put much of the effort that's gone into pulling this event together today. So if you haven't said hi, please say hi during the mixer and reception for the second part of our gathering today, okay? So in terms of folks that we have in the room today, thank you all for being here. You are really an interesting mixture of wonderful alums, friends of alums. One of our special alums here, and Andy will be doing a more formal introduction, is Congresswoman Representative Judy Chu. Thank you so much for being with us today as well, and we are delighted that you could be a part of this, and of course, as an esteemed alum of CSPB. You also have amongst you donors to the foundation, as well as current faculty and staff, and leadership of Alliant International University. So I'm going to ask each of you to stand for just a very quick intro. Again, so if you don't know these folks, you can kind of keep an eye out for them in the next phase of the gathering. So we have with us today President and CEO Andy Vaughn. We have Provost Tracy Heller. We have the Dean of CSPB, David Stewart. Of course, the Associate Dean and Distinguished Professor, Dr. Debra Kawahara. And the beloved Campus Director for all of you know, probably don't need an introduction, Dr. Stephanie Byersveld. Folks, thank you for being with us today, and I'd like to pass this over to, we won't even have you sit down, David. Thank you so much, and we'll pass this right to Dr. David Stewart.
Thank you, Vaughn. Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming out on this lovely Saturday, and I'm very glad to be here with all of you. I'm David Stewart. I'm the Dean of CSPP. This is the start of my 5th academic year as Dean, and it is my great honor of my career to be here, and this day sort of proves why. You know, CSPP is founded on several simple but radical propositions. One is that psychologists should be trained at a scale to meet the needs of the community, moving out of sort of small university-based programs to freestanding professional psychology and train psychologists in numbers that can actually implement the stuff we do. The second proposition is that psychologists should be trained by psychologists who are practitioners, not just theorists and researchers, but people who have practice. Now, in any other profession, this is not radical stuff, right? Architects, lawyers, physicians, nurses, chiropractors all get trained this way. In psychology, it's radical, right? And so we've been doing this for 50-some years, and some might ask, how's it working? And so I have a spoiler alert today. When I am here with the Honorable Congress Member Chu and the esteemed Madam President-elect Kawahara, and I intone those titles and those names, it suggests that we're onto something here. Maybe the CSPP thing will work out. And so I'm thrilled to hear from them and to dialogue with all of you. And before we do that, I'll introduce our president, who I know every day works tirelessly to advocate and champion professional education in mental health and other professions, and is an innovative and visionary leader, President Andy Vaughn.
So a few words about the California School of Professional Psychology. It was born in 1969, not hard for me to remember, it's my same birthday, so we're both 55 years old this year. And as Dr. Stewart mentioned, the CSPP Foundation elements were really all about access and about not just for students, but for the general public to access mental health. The clinical psychology programs at CSPP and now Alliant University have grown to be the largest provider in the entire country of licensed clinical psychologists. About 13-14% in the entire country come from our schools. That's pretty impressive. The second most populous psychology school is a distant, about half of what CSPP does. We've been doing some research in the last few weeks about other programs at CSPP. Our marriage family therapy program, we learned, is the 5th largest in the country. And by the way, in California, almost half of all licensed psychologists come from CSPP, and that is really impressive. So yes, David, we're onto something. Something's working right. And when we look at the organization, it's not just about metrics and numbers and market share. That's a byproduct. That's what happens if you do things right. When you're in the heartbeat of Alliant and CSPP, it's something you feel. And I've been at Alliant 10 years now, almost 10 years. I worked for 5 different universities in my 30-year higher education career. And there's something really special here. I don't have to tell all of you that. You already know whether you have gone to school here or you work here or you're associated somehow with Alliant. It's something you feel. It's very special. I have never worked for an organization where I'm as emotionally connected as this one. We've all had jobs. This is a lot more than that. This organization is so special for not just the people we have, but what we do as a group of people and who we put out in the public, which is all of you here today. And we're so thankful for that. Whether you're a faculty member, a congressperson, an alum, thank you for what you do, because we make a big difference in our communities. And that's what CSPP and Alliant is all about. So before I introduce our keynote speaker today, I wanted to tell you a little story. I love storytelling, and this happened about 2 years ago. I had a chance to work with Dr. Chu's office and Dr. Chu herself very closely. Not for the best of reasons, but the outcome was good, so it's a happy story today. About 2 years ago, I'm at home. It's probably, and I go to bed at about 8:30. I'm an early to bed person. I get up at 3 though, just to clarify, so I'm not sleeping 9 hours. And so the phone rings, it's literally 8:30, and it's our regulatory attorney calling me at 8:30 at night, and I thought, well, that can't be good. It's one of those phone calls that you get and you think, okay, you look at the watch and you go, that's not good. I actually answered the phone that way. I said, this can't be good. And Tony is his name, and Tony said, yeah, it's not. Are you sitting down? And I thought, oh gosh, what now? And he said, tomorrow morning, the federal government is releasing a new regulation about licensure programs in the United States. And I said, okay. And he said, they've included some carve-outs for medical doctors and dentists and other kinds of doctors on the physical health side. And he said they did not include mental health licensed professionals. I'll cut to the chase because it's a long, boring regulation. I'm not going to explain it all to you. But Washington, D.C. is full of people with really good intentions. And I've learned that over the years because I took about 20 trips out there on this particular issue. What I've learned is a lot of people have great ideas in D.C., but sometimes when regulations are written or policies are written, they don't know what they don't know. And it took us about 2 years to get the federal government to change their mind about mental health professionals because they forgot. And I think for those that work at Alliant and for those that are in the mental health professional fields, we know that. Sometimes physical health gets all the attention, but what we're still trying to do as a school, and you're trying to do as alums and practitioners, is to make sure everyone knows that mental health should not have a stigma to it, and mental health should be accessible for everyone. Don't forget about mental health. It's just as important, if not more important at times, than your physical health. What we've learned as professionals is the two are connected. You can't talk about physical health without mental health being a part of that equation. Unfortunately, it took us 2 years to convince the federal government to change the regulation to also insert mental health programs, but guess who we turned to among the first people to help us? And that is Congresswoman Judy Chu. So I traveled to DC many times, and just have to say that your office welcomed us with open arms, and you did too. We probably got to know each other a little too well over the time because we were in DC so much talking in the Department of Education about changes. But I must say that I've never met anyone in Congress over the years as open to helping the citizens, not just in the district she serves, but also for mental health advocacy. Dr. Chu herself marched over to the department and was an advocate. This is not just an Alliant issue. This was a nationwide mental health access issue, and made sure they understood from her standpoint as a graduate of Alliant, but also more importantly, someone that advocates for mental health access and mental health progression, meaning professionals to serve the field that we live and breathe every day. If it weren't for her help, we would have never gotten that accomplished. And I just wanted to share with you how much she cares about people and how much we've seen her on the front lines helping us help you. And that is quite a story. We want to thank you for that. Let's hear it for Dr. Chu on that. Congresswoman Chu was first elected to Congress in 2009 and has proudly served the district we sit in today, including Pasadena and some other cities close by. But it's just been a pleasure to get to know you over the years. You've spoken at our commencement ceremonies. You've helped us with mental health advocacy in DC. And there's no one in Congress that can help us more than you. We thank you for that. Again, Dr. Chu, our keynote speaker today.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. And yes, it was wonderful to be able to advocate on this issue, which had to do with how graduate schools are evaluated based on their graduates and the income they earn. But we know that people in the mental health profession have to spend a few years in the field before they are able to earn the income that they ultimately will get. So this is the same situation for medical professionals, but certainly this carve out for medical professionals should have been applied to mental health professionals. So that's what the issue was all about, and I'll never forget being in a meeting with Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona, and I raised my hand and I said, "Hey, what about the psychologists?" You know. So I think he did hear me loud and clear, and I am so glad that this situation was ultimately resolved. Well, thank you, everybody. It is so wonderful to be back here with all of you, the alumni of CSPP. It's especially wonderful to be here to see how, since I've been here, CSPP has supported so many psychologists in training and has made a huge impact on communities here in Southern California. You know, it seems like just yesterday I was in the university. I was at UCLA, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Nonetheless, well, I thought I was good at math, so I chose math as a career and thought I'd be a computer scientist. But then I started getting involved in all kinds of activism, campus activism at UCLA. And then I started volunteering in this agency helping Angelenos facing addiction. And I just felt that this math was not doing it. I just had to change my educational goals and do something that would help people. And so that's why I was very, very attracted to this new school called California School of Professional Psychology. I was attracted to this innovative hands-on training in the practice of psychology that was offered here. So yes, I went through the program, did the internships, which by the way had a huge impact on my legislation today. And I graduated in 1979, and I certainly can say that I made the right choice. And that CSPP, after becoming Alliant International University, kept on growing, and now has equipped 50,000 alumni with the knowledge and skills to transform the world person by person. Now, ultimately, I ended up getting diverted into politics, first on the school board, then the city council, then the California State Assembly, and then to Congress. But looking back, I can see how profoundly my education at CSPP has affected me, influenced my career choices and decisions, and affected my direction in Congress. And you would be surprised to know that despite our collective mission to improve communities, I am the only psychologist out of the 435 members of Congress. Yeah? And in fact, in Congress, I fought to get onto the Ways and Means Committee, which is considered the most powerful committee in Congress, in the House, that is. And I have chosen in every Congress to be a member of the Health Subcommittee, which oversees the financial aspects of our entire healthcare system, including mental health. I entered public service because I believed that I could make an impact on society's overall well-being, including people's mental health, by changing our policies for the better. And for many others, and certainly for myself, that means increasing access to mental health treatment for everybody in this nation. So amongst the signature bills I have, one is called the Post-Grad Act. And that is meant to address the shortage of mental health professionals. We have to make it easier and more affordable to obtain a graduate degree and enter this field. So my bill, the Post-Grad Act, makes federal direct subsidized loans available for graduate students once again. Yeah, we did have this, but it was taken away during a budget cut period. And what this does is provide relief for students while they are in school, and interest is not charged on their student loans, which can be a very significant savings for them. And it can end up, without that subsidy, costing them thousands of additional dollars in repaying it. Since mental health work is such a rewarding and in-demand career, no one should be forced into a lifetime of debt to get into it. And then there is my Increasing Access to Mental Health in Schools Act. This has reached greater visibility because of the school shootings that we have seen around the nation. But in general, what do we see? We see that, especially in our low-income K-12 schools, your zip code doesn't determine your child's mental health care access, and that the access to it has been very lacking. And the rise of social media and the isolation of the pandemic revealed how critical school psychologists, counselors, and social workers are to mental health. We need to have greater access. We need to have more of these professionals in each school. My bill would provide funding to support the education, training, and employment of mental health professionals in high-need schools. And it would create a new federal student loan forgiveness program for mental health professionals who complete 5 years of employment at a low-income school. I do have to say that this is the bill that actually made it into a whole package of mental health bills that was moving in the last Congress. And I look forward to, if we are able to take back the House, in this coming November, that we can have this set of mental health bills move once again, because everybody knows that the mental health needs in this country are even greater than they were before. And then it's important that we don't leave seniors behind. As everyone here knows, clinical psychologists are doctoral level providers who play a critical role in delivering mental health services in the Medicare population. But the Medicare program does not currently recognize clinical psychologists as independent care providers across all settings of care. So to ensure that seniors access clinical psychologists directly for mental health services without a special sign-off from a physician, we are changing the situation where we would have Medicare psychologists get authority to practice independently and make psychologists eligible for the same Medicare payments received by physicians for services provided in areas with a shortage of mental health professionals. So this is the Increasing Mental Health Options Act. So let me say this. One of the greatest introductions I have is to say, I am Congressmember Judy Chu, and I'm a psychologist. So I am so thankful that CSPP gave me the tools to look deeply into the human condition, and I'm so grateful that my elected position gave me the power to do something about it. So thank you all so very much. I really appreciate this time with you. And now it is my honor to introduce another psychologist, CSPP's own Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Distinguished Professor and the incoming President of the American Psychological Association, Dr. Debra Kawahara. And let me say a few words first. Dr. Kawahara will serve as the 2025 APA President starting this January. And she's such a trailblazer. She will serve as the first Asian American leader of the association in its 132-year history. How about that? She is a multicultural feminist scholar whose work centers on intersectionality, women's issues, leadership, and the application of multicultural and feminist values and social justice principles. And she will bring valuable lived and research experience to the role. I'm so excited to see how her contributions improve the APA for years to come. Dr. Kawahara, congratulations on your new role, and I would like to present a certificate of congressional recognition to you for this incredible achievement. So please come forward, and at the same time, I would also like to present a certificate of congressional recognition to the California School of Professional Psychology. So please come forward. Congratulations on your incredible achievements in affecting the area of mental health professionals.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so
That's right. Deborah's whispering. There you go.
Welcome, everybody. The way we're going to proceed is Debra and I are going to discuss her path to the presidency of APA for about 45 minutes. Then we're going to open it up for some questions. But given that I am the moderator, I get prerogative. I came to CSPP 49 years ago this month. And as we are about to celebrate Debra becoming a giant upon whose shoulders those who follow will stand, it's important to note some of those other giants in the field. So there are two that I think deserve some acknowledgement. One is to those folks in 1969 who created the first freestanding school of professional psychology and opened up the field to all of the people who sit in the room and all of the people like you. The other firsts and people who I think are important to note are those who pursued the APA accreditation, the first freestanding school to pursue APA accreditation. And I just need to share a story about those days in probably 1977. Our application was rejected. We appealed. Our report was refused. We appealed. Conducted a site visit that had some of the most atrocious psychologists in the world as our site visitors. And perhaps the worst moment of that event was when one of them, in meeting with students, said to one of our students, "What's a nice young girl like you doing in a place like this?" Now that created an intense resolve, and we moved through and we got APA accreditation on appeal. CSPPLA, the first place to do that. But I mention that story because as we see Debra about to become the president of the American Psychological Association, we have answered the question of what is a nice young woman like you doing in a place like this. So I just thought that was important. And now on to the reason you're all here. Because 44 years later, we have an alum who has been elected president. And so why don't you tell us a bit about your background, Debra?
Okay, well, before I get started with my background, I just want to thank everyone that came out today. And in some ways, this is like a homecoming to me. I actually went to this campus as a graduate student and walked the halls, sat in the seats that, the students are sitting in now, and I could have never imagined this journey that I have taken. So I would just say it's possible. Your dreams, your wildest dreams can become reality. Who would have known back then where I was headed? So anyways, let me start. For those of you that know the LA area, I grew up in Los Angeles in a city called Gardena, which when I was growing up was really heavily populated with Asian Americans and particularly Japanese Americans. And I think that was really influential because it somewhat incubated me within a community that I could see cultural representation in the council members, in teachers, in community leaders. And so when I was growing up, my culture was represented in the community. They had cultural events that were just part of the community. It wasn't like this side Japanese American thing. It was actually part of the whole community. And I think in having that experience, I do think it allowed me to grow up thinking that I could be what I wanted to be. If I just kind of tried to figure out how I was going to get there. So it wasn't until college that I really understood what does it mean, and I'm going to use the word minority, what does it mean to be an ethnic minority in the United States? And when I say minority, it means power, not having the power and privilege as the dominant culture in the United States. And in my studies and my interactions with peers, I started learning about the experiences they had with discrimination, with prejudice, and with oppression. And I also got the privilege at UCLA as an undergrad to actually take a class with Dr. Stanley Sue, who has recently passed. But he was an Asian American psychologist who was studying ethnic minorities in community mental health, in community services. And he did one of the landmark studies. Well, I was fortunate enough to take an Asian American psychology class from him. And I could see how psychology could infuse my interest in Asian American studies. And so that's how I started to pursue psychology. And as I was kind of going at that idealistic time when you're in your early 20s, I was idealistic in wanting to change the world. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make it better for everyone. And so when I pursued my degree, I went from engineering to pharmacy to then psychology. So it was somewhat of going from what I knew to what I loved, which was I wanted to help people, and I wanted to make the world a different place.
And so, Debra, then you complete your undergraduate work at UCLA, and you find this place in 1989 called the California School of Professional Psychology, Los Angeles. What in the name of God led you to make the decision to come here?
Okay, so as a first generation college graduate or college student, I really didn't know this thing about graduate school. I really grew up thinking you just get really good grades and you work really hard. And I also had to pay for my own college. So I was really just going to school and then going to work to try and pay off what tuition and books and my car and insurance and things like that. So I didn't know, but I did know I had this dream about being executive director of a community mental health center. That's what my initial graduate school dream was to do that. And so I knew I wanted to work with underrepresented and underserved communities, and I thought I could do that through community mental health. And so that's why I chose CSPP, because I knew it had a program that was going to give me that experience.
I love that you take us back to those days, because remembering the process we went through to adopt a mission statement that was like a mission statement that did not exist in higher education. That key for me to that mission statement were two main pieces. One is that our education is to learn how to combat racism, sexism, heterosexism, and other social ills. And the other main part of that was that we are here to learn how to serve the underserved. And for any educational institution, and particularly a graduate program in any field, and clinical psychology, that was a rarity. And I believe that by doing that, made people like you possible, all of folks like you possible. And the fact that now, all this time later, those are still the beacons that go out to the world as, if you want to do that, if you want to be that, this is the place that you come to do that. So tell us a bit about what was it like in graduate school in 1989.
So when I came to CSPP, we actually weren't here at this campus. If you all know downtown LA, we were near Rampart, which is near Civil League, and if you know Tommy Burgers, it's right there. So that is where the school was. And, you know, I see people that were there when I was a student there. But really, when I chose the program, part of the reason why I chose the program was, at the time, it was cutting edge. It was innovative in that the faculty were actually at community mental health centers, and then they were coming and teaching us. So we had someone from King Drew Medical Center, which is located in the Watts area. We had someone from El Centro, which is in East LA. We had my dissertation chair, Dr. Masuda, who was at Asian Pacific Family Center. So we had all of these professors that were actually practicing in communities and then coming and teaching our classes. And so that, you know, this is standard now in APA accredited programs, but it wasn't back then, that in every single class, every single week, not just 1 week in our courses, every single class had multicultural and diversity infused within it. And I think that still is something that's not done in a lot of graduate programs.
And I think, so part of the logic behind this focus is, at the time, CSPP was a nonprofit corporation chartered by the state of California, and it was chartered for the specific purpose of delivering competent psychologists to serve the people of the state of California. And those of us who were involved, looking at the people who were the state of California and who was being trained with what kind of curriculum and content, seemed to me to challenge the corporate charter. We were not doing what the charter required us to do. So we had to take a place, and we had to have students like Debra willing to engage us to change the whole psychology of the institution. Because it's hard to think of it now, but a white privileged curriculum for a white privileged population is very different than what we are trying to do. So, and psychology would not be the same, and Debra would not be in a position to be the president-elect of APA if that had not changed. Now, it may have changed, it may have been historical, it was going to change anyway, but it sure was nice to be a part of creating a real psychology that takes community and people in need into account, rather than just theory of individuality. So, yeah. So, Debra, you talk about your experience. You really have you developed a service focus as a part of your graduate school education, and I'm assuming that your commitment and focus on service led you into APA governance and led you to where you are. So share with folks, if you will, that sense of service and how it's influenced your direction and your path.
You know, I think for me, I got involved actually with the Asian American Psychological Association first. And really this was a way that I could get involved professionally, but it also was a way that I could meet people. I tend to be more introverted, and so I'm not like, social hours aren't my favorite thing to do. So what I did is I started getting involved in different things. So I was on the newsletter, and then slowly, other things I would get involved in being a member at large. And then slowly I moved into APA. And it was more letting the things that I was interested in and my values kind of decide, okay, I'll try the next thing, right? And slowly I just started working, and then people started seeing that I actually work, because there are some people. So I would be asked, can you come and join and do this? And if it was interesting, I'd say yes. I'd say yes probably more than I said no. But really, once I started getting involved in Division 35, which is the Society for the Psychology of Women, that started really my focus on more systemic policy within the field and beyond the field, and doing advocacy. And I think I understood that my service was tied to then moving the profession forward, which then impacted society. So really a system view, which came from a community psychology background, in knowing that the impact that you can have, can be done through service, can be done through advocacy. And so I think my service, as I got farther and farther in my career, I could take on bigger and bigger roles.
I think somebody should do some research on introvert and service, because I think you're probably a good example of how effective, although you define yourself that way, how effective you can be in outreach. You're the editor of a journal, and I assume, talk to us a bit about the journal, how you see it, and how it affects what we're all learning.
So I became the editor-in-chief for Women in Therapy, and Women in Therapy is a journal that focuses on feminist psychotherapy and the application of feminist principles in practice. And really the journal, in my role as editor, I had three goals. One, I wanted to publish areas in feminist psychology that typically did not get published. So I did an anti-racist feminist psychotherapy issue. I did, it's in the works, is an indigenous feminism special issue. We did a women's healer special issue. So there were issues that I, as editor, could use my position to get things that typically are not published in the traditional research journals that our field publishes. So that was one, how I could use my position in a way that then puts out publications, especially of work that people are doing that's really important, but maybe cannot get it through the peer review process to get it published. The second that I did that I thought was really important was to actually build the pathway for students and early career to get into the editorial review process. We know that when you do reviews for journal articles, that makes the decision about whether that article gets published or not. And unless someone that has that expertise knows about the topic, I've gotten reviews from people that clearly didn't know the literature, didn't know the research. And so when you got the review back, it was like, the comments didn't match what the state of the research in that area. And yet they had the power to say, reject this publication. And so it was really important for me to train people to become ad hoc reviewers and then get on the editorial board so that those people that have that expertise could then be part of the process to get these works fairly reviewed to get published.
I use terms loosely, so bear with me, but I love that subversive quality of you. Because journals historically have been the bailiwick of the white male population of the profession. Because if you can control what people have access to as information, research, and learning, you can keep your position as the dominant position. So if people like you weren't willing to move into that, if you weren't willing to educate and train people how to get into that business, all of that would continue to not reflect the realities of the world. So I appreciate you taking on that task and making that happen. If I'm correct, you also were co-chair of one of the multicultural summits.
I was the lead coordinator.
coordinator.
I was a coordinator for 2011, and then I was the lead coordinator 2013.
And I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know about that. So would you share some of what?
Sure. So in 1999, four really well-known multicultural psychologists, Dr. Rosie Bingham Davis, Dr. Melba Vasquez, Dr. Darrell Sue, and Dr. Lisa Porche Burke put together this national multicultural conference and summit. And the first one, I believe, was in Newport Beach, and it's been every other year since then. And it brings together multicultural scholars, practitioners. I mean, it is the multicultural conference that everyone goes to that's working in this area. In 2011, I had the great fortune of being on the coordination team, and then I got chosen to be the lead coordinator of it in 2013. And I'm very proud of that conference, because one of the things we were able to do back then is have the first transgender judge in Texas as our keynote speaker there. And at that time, it was just starting to be known in the field about transgender issues. And so we very much wanted a speaker that was going to represent that community. So I'm very proud of that. We also had Jocelyn, the former Surgeon General, Elders, yes, who kind of talked about her comment about masturbation. And then all of her work as Surgeon General.
So I want to move on to a different topic, but are there other aspects of your pathway in terms of APA that deserve some additional comment, or?
You know, one of the things I would say is, because I was involved in Division 35 and it really had a feminist perspective, I think the mentoring that I got, people who took me under their wings, and that kind of paying it forward, knowing that that's going to then propel other feminist psychologists. And I just will name a few because they have been so instrumental. Dr. Oliva Speen has been very, very instrumental in my career. Dr. Jean Lao Chin, who passed away during COVID. Dr. Natalie Porter. There's so many, Dr. Ellen Kashak. There were so many people who have mentored, supported me, and kind of given me a lot of opportunities. And I think that was really important in terms of my career.
And bursting with pride, I would also mention that those folks are also a part of the CSPP system, just in case you didn't know. So let me go to a different place. So you're the first Asian American woman to be the head of the American Psychological Association. As I understand it, people who are the first at anything open doors and serve to, it's the idea of the shoulders. You become the shoulders on which people can stand. So since you are going to be the first, have you seen an impact on people like you? Do you sense that, what do you see as what your election means to those who follow you?
So I think I'm going to take a step back and tell you, okay, so I think I want to first acknowledge all the shoulders that I stand on, because I don't think I would be in this position unless all those trailblazers and pioneers did the hard work to even get here. And I think one of the things I learned as I was running, a good friend of mine, Dr. Gordon Nagayama Hall, had said, you know, when he was in APA, he didn't think that APA was his home. He says, this is finally becoming my APA. And so we know that, and I just read this morning, which is really interesting, Audre Lorde says, a revolution doesn't happen one time. You know, and I think that's something for us to all remember. That change, even within APA, is going to take a long time. So I'm just one in many that will hopefully continue to move APA in being a more inclusive and just association for everyone. When I decided to run for APA president, and even when I ran for the board of directors, this was at a time when the heightened anti-Asian hate and violence was happening, and we had two waves. The first one being the stereotypes of the coronavirus and it relating to Chinese. And then we saw upswing of hate and violence towards Asians. And it was anybody that physically looked Asian, we were under attack. The second was then the shootings in Atlanta. And at both of those times, that was when I decided that I needed to run, because the issue about visibility and voice was important, that we needed to be represented. But it wasn't just, I think representation matters, but it's not just about representation. It's about then having the voice at the table to make sure that our issues do not go silent. And so I had decided at both of those junctures, at the board of directors and as president, because I never really thought that I would run for APA president. I was at a point where it was like, you know what, I have the experience, I have the knowledge, and I really felt like I could contribute, because the question came up, if I get elected, what do I want to do in that position? And I think the thing you're saying was one of the reasons why. It is so important for people to see the power of role modeling is so strong. And I knew, me even just running, I had students and I had early careers come up to me and say, oh my gosh, you doing this makes it seem possible for me to do it when I get to that point in my career. And so just in that, I already made an impact by just running.
Just running.
Yeah.
I just think that the only way, I agree with you, I'm kind of a dialectician, so it's like, one step forward, whatever it is, 2 steps forward. It's backwards and forwards. It's not like that. You know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about. But it's the sense of, so you can never relax. You can never, like, we made it. So there is the sense, though, of you have to build a critical mass. And so every time somebody moves into a new role and says this becomes possible for all of you, it enables a larger assemblage of people to move in that direction. So you've changed my life as a result of doing this. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh my gosh,
All right.
thank you.
So we got a 10-minute signal.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, despite that, we'll keep going.
Okay.
But why don't we move on to, oh, I'm supposed to do this too, because I'm talking like it's out. So you're going to be APA president come January. What are some of the initiatives that you want to see and make happen?
So this is what I'm working on right now, is to get my initiatives and task forces in place. And so there's 3 that I'm currently working to form. The first is disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. And part of this is that what we know is that we don't do a very good job in terms of disasters. And we know that we have them all the time now. I mean, we're in the midst of wildfires happening in California right now. So part of my initiative is to actually write an advisory report that helps in giving a blueprint of best practices of disaster preparedness, response, and recovery, and from a community-based approach. Now, part of that is because one of the things that people have seen over and over and over again is that the federal government has resources, but they can only stay for a short amount of time. And the way our federal government works, they kind of have a one-size-fits-all, and we know that that doesn't work for communities, that you have to be able to kind of fit it to whatever the community needs are. And we also know that there's a lot of cultural differences in communities. And so what we're going to try and do is do a blueprint, but each community can then make it their own. But we hope that we can learn some lessons from like Hurricane Katrina, from Maui, from other disasters that have happened, and put it together so that communities know how do they respond quickly, and also build that infrastructure for long-term recovery. Because the federal government only can stay for a short amount of time and then they leave, but they have the resources. So what we're wanting to do is have communities build their infrastructure so they can then kind of see it through the long-term recovery. So that's one. The second is, and this one, I'm working in collaboration with the Human Health and Services, the Office of Research in Women's Health. And what we're hoping to do is focus on menopause and midlife wellness and health. And the reason why we're focusing on this is the director of the Women's Office has found that at menopause, that is when women that are born with vaginas, this is when it's a critical period where significant health issues either start or they get exacerbated. And this is one of the phases within women's lives that has not been focused on. And so that's a lot of people that we haven't really focused on. And so so you're laughing. Oh, thumbs up. Yeah. And actually, as I'm talking about it, a lot of people are saying, yes, this is long overdue because women mothers, daughters, nieces, right? You're gonna go through menopause. And why aren't we talking about it? Why don't we know very much about it? So, and I even went to my physician assistants, and she said, the people in the practice, they don't really know that much about menopause. So really that's one of the ones, what I'm wanting to do, or what this task force we're trying to work on, is building some research guidelines that includes the gaps in this area, because it hasn't really been studied a lot. We're actually talking about doing some clinical practice guidelines to help practitioners help people in this phase. I know that it's been coming up in terms of a workforce issue. And it's often just, they just are having problems. But really it's because of this transition that they're making. And it makes sense, right? Your body's going through a whole hormonal change. And then we're going to do dissemination of the information. And kind of a secondary goal of it is the person that I'm working with in the Women's Health Office wants to disseminate these reports so that behavioral health is focused on in NIH. So we're really hoping that this has a huge impact. Then the third is engaging psychology's future, and I was so excited to hear about Congresswoman Chu's, the various bills that she's working on. What I'm working on is where I'm wanting to have local events at high school and community colleges to try and excite young people about the field of psychology and choosing psychology as a career. And so we're going to try and have local events throughout the United States during my presidential year. And I just found out in the APA Advocacy Office, they are actually going to try to tie my initiative in introducing a bill to Congress that will then support these kind of events in mental health services. And so I'm very excited about that as well. And it ties really well into her bill in getting funding, because I know that was one of the concerns I got from graduate students. How can we encourage someone going into this field and getting those school loans? Well, if she gets her bill through, then we very much can encourage many, many young people, because we know of the mental health crisis in the United States.
And I'm assuming that folks in the audience who find your initiatives attractive can reach out to you, and you would love to have them help you and participate in some of this.
Absolutely.
So, and I love Dr. Chu's comments too. My graduate education, I took out what is now a very small national direct student loan. And because I served in a low-income community for 5 years, it was totally forgiven. And to not have that option available to people in this field now, because the costs are outrageous and the payback cost is even more outrageous, to not provide some kind of support. I'll quit editorializing, but I went to my undergraduate for $49 a semester, $96 a year, and I could have full health insurance for $3. So I'm getting, excuse me. So let's open up. Are there any questions that any of you have for?
I'm gonna grab this microphone so we can.
Oh, okay. If anybody has any questions, if not, we get more time. Oh, sure.
I'll recognize this individual. Testing.
Hi, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
My question is this, and I don't know if Judy addressed this, but, and I think it links into your disaster preparedness program interest. with COVID, there's been a breaking down of walls between states and practice. Psychologists are no longer geographically restricted. There are the program of SciPact, which I'm sure you're well aware of. Unfortunately, there's states, including California, that continue to block the introduction of legislation that allows people like me to practice across state boundaries. I'm forced to get licenses in other states in order to qualify for that, and California, in its infinite ignorance, the Board of Psychology in particular, has blocked it for ridiculous reasons. So I'm wondering what APA might do to break down those walls, because at the end of the day, that makes accessibility greater for all the populations you speak to, increases the availability of resources for those in need.
This is one of the issues, I think, at the state level, that we don't have a national licensure in place. And that's why SciPac here in California is having such a difficult time in passing. Each state is given their own decision-making power around licensure, and that is what's kind of holding it up. And I would say to you, I mean, one of the things that I've learned, and I know people in this room, I see them, advocacy is so important in terms of, you know, getting involved with CPA so that it does change. Because really at the state level, that is what's going to make the difference in terms of SciPac getting approved. You know, APA doesn't have the authority in terms of licensure. It's at state boards that it gets decided.
Understood, yet APA could advocate to put pressure and influence upon state boards and places like CPA, which are also resistant to this thing that impedes. So that's my point, is that I'm wondering if APA would extend themselves to advocate against the states. I'm well aware that it's state by state. Thank you.
Yeah, what I would say is we do have a policy-making body, which is the Council of Representatives, and that would be the body that you would need to go through in order for then APA to make any kind of policy decisions, but that policy has to be in place first.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I get to use the mic. Do I need to use my mic, Kristen?
We may please.
Also, thank you. Congratulations on
Thank you.
the honor for it as well. It's well deserved, I'm sure. My question is, you mentioned the significance of mentoring in your career development. And I think that if you look at the audience, there are a group of young professionals who some would like mentoring and find mentors. And so, first part of the question is, from your perspective, is there a line of thought or behaviors that you would encourage them to take in order to identify good members and good mentors and to really engage with them? And then my second question would be that, our part of it is there are a group of us who would describe ourselves as mature professionals. And if we wanted to be mentors, what perspectives would you have for us to be able to provide that service for the community and the profession?
So you could probably help with this as well. You know, for getting mentors, one of the things I always say is to actually have multiple mentors. That really, everybody has strengths, right? And I would say try and choose people for the particular thing that you're looking for to get advice about or to get support around. The other thing I would say is that was part of the reason why I got involved, and then people got to know me, and then through that I got mentorship. There are also formal mentorship programs that you could get involved in. You know, that I would say try to That's how you can get connected to people. But I think by getting involved in professional organizations, that's one way. The second is to be open to different kinds of mentors. They don't have to just be in psychology. They can be in various things. For those of you that don't know, my husband is in agriculture. I learned so much from hanging out with people at the Farm Bureau. They have to run a business, they have to do regulations, they have to deal with labor laws, so, from that, I think that makes me a better administrator. So really just being open to different people. And I just say, if you're interested or want someone to be your mentor, I know it's hard, but go and just talk to them. You can ask them. And they'll say yes or no, but it doesn't hurt you to try and see if that person's willing to do that for you. So that's what I would say about mentoring, and I'm sure you have a lot more to say.
Not a lot more, because I would just second your thought there. It seems to me one of the things that happens when you are in an educational setting is you believe to demonstrate any kind of need for help from others is a weakness. You need to get over that crap, because that's the way it all happens. It also means you have to be yourself and present with each other, so that you can see I can see the qualities in you that I want to have some connection to. So it really is, it's like a relationship.
It is a relationship.
It's a core relationship, and so sometimes you'll get rejected. I don't experience that, but I understand that.
Yeah.
But more than that, you will connect to people, and the connection ends up to be deep and meaningful over time. I look at some of the people in the audience who were, quote, students of mine, and it's now decades later, and we still see each other, we know each other, and we can pick up a thought from the last time we saw each other, even if it was 5 or 10 years ago, because we've got that relationship. And I don't know how anybody gets through life without as many of those strong, positive relationships as possible. Okay.
The second part of your question was being a mentor, right? I think for me, it's knowing that it's hard to reach out, and so I look for people. If they seem like there's something I can be of help to them, that they're working on, that I have expertise in, that I might reach out to them. And they really appreciate that. And so just making yourself available. I think that is one of the things, when I thought about my presidency, I really do want to make APA open to everybody. It's everybody's APA is what my goal is. And I think mentoring is part of that, is sharing what you have as gifts, and then hopefully from your example to them, they will then go on to do that for others afterwards. So.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to get signs for everybody who's a mature professional to say, I'm available.
Maybe one of the stickers.
One of the stickers. Are there other questions? Because I'm getting, again, the cut signal. No. But are there others there? Oh.
I have one more. Should I shout it out?
You probably do.
Okay. This may be stem into the politics of the world that we live in, but I'm wondering we've talked about first order, second order change. I'm sure you went through all those same courses that I did, social basis of behavior back in 1989. And we see things going on in our country of racism, sexism, and it's making a comeback in large ways, with a large swath of our population being empowered to do that, emboldened. I'm wondering what APA is doing in that regard to deal with that, because that's a huge mental health problem of contributing to that, to the effects of those things.
I'd have a long answer to that in terms of everything. I think one of the things that we've done is we've issued apologies. That's just the first step. So we actually did an apology to BIPOC communities and then set up the Racial Equity Health Fund. That's gonna go to projects for those different oppressions. You know, something that I was very fortunate to be a part of is the offer of apologies on behalf of the APA to the First Peoples of the United States. And that is really part of the reason why I did my initiative on disaster preparedness, response, and recovery is the Hawaiian peoples are oftentimes left out of conversations. And so I am focusing on the people on the Hawaiian Islands in terms of taking the board and actually trying to figure out how do we help indigenous communities in terms of this. I think so APA is trying to address it in going in stages. So this next part that they're gonna focus on is disabilities and accessibilities. And that's the next kind of area that they're gonna focus on. So APA is specifically looking at ways in which we can focus on these issues. The other thing that I would say is educating the public. So one of the exciting things that we've been doing is we've been partnering with Sesame Street and doing kind of informing them, but also with their characters around racism and trying to actually educate both the kids that watch Sesame Street and the caregivers. And so providing information around racism and racism in society. And so those are some of the different ways in which APA is trying to address these things. It's huge, but like I said, trying to just make steps so that we are making progress.
So APA is now what I would call a blessed organization because it is about to have Dr. Kawahara as its president. So please join me in congratulating Dr. Kawahara. And I want to thank you all for attending. And there is a reception that is outside somewhere. There are students who are ready to direct you. Apparently there's a marching band down the road, but stay away. But before that, I want to make an announcement. 46 years ago, on November 1, CSPPLA was changed forever. We made a support staff hire of a 19-year-old woman. She went on to become our admissions person, our financial aid person, and ultimately campus director. She's had a positive impact on almost every student who has ever attended CSPP-LA. She has nurtured and supported student government, student clubs, and anyone who came to her with a problem. She has worked with the staff to create an environment, and I dare say a culture, of respect, inclusion, fairness, and compassion. And now on November 1, 2024, 46 years to the date that she began, she will retire, leaving an incredible void that will be difficult to fill. Be sure to wish her well at the reception. Staff, please stand and take a bow. And now let's go party.